Welcome to Footsteps of Empires, the channel where we uncover the greatest battles, boldest leaders, and turning points that shaped civilizations. If you're passionate about history, war strategies, and the rise and fall of empires, make sure to subscribe and join our growing community of history enthusiasts. Today, we step onto one of the bloodiest battlefields of the ancient world, Cannae, 216 BC. A day when Hannibal, the tactical genius of Carthage, delivered a crushing blow to the Roman Republic, not just with numbers, but with pure strategy. What happened at Cannae? Why is it still studied in military academies across the world? Let's unravel the tactics, the betrayal, and the brilliance behind this historic slaughter, right here on Footsteps of Empires. The Carthaginian army, a menacing force under the leadership of Hannibal Barca, gathers on the blistering plains of Cannae, ready to face the might of Rome. The sun beats down relentlessly, casting long shadows over the army, while the heat rises in a shimmering haze that seems to mirror the tension in the air. Soldiers sharpen their swords, tighten their armor, and whisper about the battle ahead. The ground beneath them is dry and cracked, an omen of the blood that will soon stain the earth. At the heart of this chaos stands Hannibal, composed and commanding, exuding an air of confident calm. His steely gaze sweeps over his troops, but beneath his reserved exterior, his mind is a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. For all his years of preparation, the countless battles fought and won, he knows this moment will change everything. Not just for Rome, but for him personally. A whisper of a prophecy haunts him, an echo that had been passed down through his family. Victory here will cost you everything. Hannibal's thoughts flicker to the war-torn land of his homeland, Carthage, and the sacrifices made to bring him to this point. It was a gamble to bring his army this far, to defy the might of Rome with such a smaller force. He had once believed that Cannae would be the turning point, the place where Rome's arrogance would be shattered. But now, the shadows of uncertainty weigh on his heart. His brilliance as a strategist is unquestioned. But could the cost of this battle be greater than he had ever anticipated? As he prepares his forces for the engagement, a sense of foreboding creeps into his bones. A hidden betrayal lurks within his ranks, a treacherous whisper from a trusted lieutenant who harbors ambitions of his own. This betrayal threatens to unravel the delicate plan Hannibal has woven with such care. The general who has been by his side for years, loyal, strong, and once unshakable, has been compromised. But by whom? And why? The army is ready, but the storm brewing within Hannibal's own ranks may prove to be more dangerous than the one approaching from the Roman forces. His heart beats faster, his mind racing with every possible outcome. He knows that his strategy will require flawless execution. One mistake, one slip-up, and everything could fall apart. And yet, amid the swirling anxiety, there is no turning back. Victory could be within his grasp, but it might also be his undoing. In the eerie silence before the storm, the fate of two empires hangs in the balance. The Battle of Cannae, destined to be one of the most studied and discussed in history, is about to unfold. But for Hannibal, the war is no longer just about defeating Rome. It is about surviving the consequences of his own genius. In the grand halls of Rome, the city brimming with the confidence of centuries of triumph, the Senate's chambers buzz with activity as the preparations for war reach their peak. The men tasked with leading the Republic's armies are full of self-assurance, convinced that the Carthaginian threat will be nothing more than another footnote in Rome's storied history. Their army outnumbers Hannibal's forces nearly 2-1, and their legions are some of the most disciplined and feared in the known world. They have crushed countless foes, and Rome's dominance seems indisputable. The two consuls appointed to lead the campaign, Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus, embody Rome's faith in their superiority. Varro is impetuous, quick to dismiss any notion of danger, eager to prove himself in the heat of battle. Paulus, on the other hand, is a veteran of war, steady and calculating, yet even he is blinded by the overconfidence of his countrymen. Together, they present a facade of unity and resolve, but beneath the surface, their egos are an explosive mix. Each general believes that their approach will be the key to Rome's victory, and in their hubris, they fail to see the fatal flaw in their thinking, their refusal to consider the mind of their adversary. Unknown to the Romans, a whisper of a long-forgotten prophecy circulates among the ranks of their generals. A prophecy that, like a shadow, seems to follow the movement of their army. The Romans will fall by their own arrogance, it warns. But this prophecy, like so many others, is dismissed as superstition by the Senate, a relic of an older time. To the Romans, their own strength is undeniable, and such predictions carry no weight. The true danger, they believe, lies only in the tangible strategy, numbers, and sheer might. The Romans march towards Cannae with a sense of invincibility. The size of their army is staggering, an overwhelming force that will crush the Carthaginians beneath its weight. The soldiers are primed for battle, but it is the leaders, blind in their arrogance, who carry the true miscalculation. They assume Hannibal, despite his cunning, will falter when faced with such an immense force. The Carthaginian general, they think, has outmaneuvered them by crossing the Alps, but he is now isolated and stretched thin in enemy territory. The Romans, convinced of their superiority, cannot fathom the tactical genius that lies in wait. As the Roman legions make their final preparations, a growing undercurrent of tension begins to stir among the commanders. Secretly, some of the Roman officers question the approach taken by their leaders. They see Hannibal's brilliance and wonder if they are truly prepared for the cunning mind that has led him so far. But their concerns are swiftly crushed by the dominant voices of Varro and Paulus, who dismiss them with forceful certainty. To question their approach is to question Rome itself, and such disobedience is unacceptable. In their minds, the battle is already won. It is merely a matter of when. As the Roman soldiers march toward Cannae, they are filled with a dangerous sense of pride, unaware that they are stepping into a trap. The roads are dusty beneath their feet, but their hearts are light, convinced that the Carthaginians will break before the weight of Rome's might. The drums of war sound in the distance, and the soldiers march in perfect formation, unaware that the true storm is yet to come. The calm before the storm is deceptive, an illusion crafted by the confidence of those who believe they are invincible. But as they approach Cannae, Rome's moment of reckoning draws closer. It is not Hannibal who will shatter their forces, but their own overconfidence, which blinds them to the genius of their adversary and the inevitable fall that awaits them on the battlefield. The day of the battle has arrived, and the plains of Cannae are alive with the sounds of preparation. The earth is churned by the heavy boots of thousands of soldiers, the clang of weapons being drawn, and the rustling of armor. The Carthaginian forces, though outnumbered, stand firm, awaiting their commander's signal. Hannibal Barca surveys the battlefield from atop his steed, his mind as sharp as a blade, his gaze unwavering despite the tension mounting around him. His men are ready, disciplined, and aware that victory will demand nothing less than absolute precision. Across the field, the Romans are lined up in battle formation, their ranks a sea of disciplined soldiers ready to charge. The sheer size of their force is staggering, and their confidence is palpable. Their consuls, Varro and Paulus, are at the helm, giving rousing speeches to inspire their men. However, beneath this bravado, there is a fatal flaw. The Romans have underestimated the subtlety and brilliance of Hannibal's strategy. They are prepared to charge into battle with overwhelming force, believing that they will crush their adversary under the weight of their numbers. As the battle begins, the Roman legions advance with their typical boldness, their shields gleaming in the sunlight, their spears raised high. The first waves of soldiers crash into the Carthaginian front line with a deafening roar. Hannibal, however, has laid his trap. His forces, seemingly outnumbered and cornered, are drawn back, creating an illusion of retreat. The Romans, with their trademark arrogance, take the bait. They surge forward, believing they have the Carthaginians on the run. The Roman soldiers are relentless, their battle cries echoing across the field as they push deeper into the Carthaginian lines. Hannibal's army, however, is not retreating. It's maneuvering. The Carthaginian forces are slowly and deliberately drawing the Romans in, creating a perfect pocket of encirclement. It's a masterstroke, the beginning of Hannibal's double envelopment. The Romans, too eager to finish the battle quickly, press on with reckless abandon, unaware that they are walking into a trap of their own making. But just as Hannibal's plan seems to be unfolding flawlessly, a twist of fate threatens to derail it. A Roman spy, someone who has infiltrated Hannibal's ranks, slips through the lines undetected. For weeks, he has been gathering information, watching, waiting. Now, with the battle in full swing, he sees the moment to act. Under the cover of the chaos, the spy slips into a hidden passage near Hannibal's command tent, where he is able to send a critical message back to Rome's consuls. He reveals the location of key Carthaginian reserves and hints at Hannibal's ultimate strategy. The Roman commanders, upon receiving this information, quickly order a shift in their strategy, and for a brief moment, it seems as if they might regain the upper hand. The spy's intelligence gives them a fleeting chance to turn the tide, to use the very element of surprise that Hannibal has relied upon against him. The Romans redirect their forces, hoping to exploit the Carthaginian weakness and shatter the trap before it is fully sprung. Hannibal, ever perceptive, senses something amiss. The movements of the Roman legions have shifted, their advance slowed. He knows that the spy's information has reached them, but he does not panic. He is not one to be easily rattled. Instead, he calmly adjusts his own tactics, feeding false signals to the Romans. The spy's interference, though a dangerous moment, has become part of his plan. By creating the illusion of vulnerability in one segment of his lines, he lures the Romans further into the trap, guiding them with the precision of a master conductor. As the Romans close in, believing they are on the verge of victory, they fall deeper into the pocket Hannibal has created. Their formation, once solid, begins to disintegrate as they are funneled into the narrowing arc of the Carthaginian encirclement. The realization begins to dawn on the Roman soldiers that they are trapped. Panic spreads like wildfire through their ranks as they struggle to break free from the tightening noose. But it is too late. The trap has been sprung, and the Romans are now surrounded on all sides. The twist of fate, the interference of the spy, has ultimately worked in Hannibal's favor. Though it threatened to expose his strategy, it has instead allowed him to tighten his grip on the battlefield, ensuring that the Romans will not escape. The clash of metal and the cries of battle continue to echo across the plains, but within the Carthaginian lines, there is an eerie calm. Hannibal watches as the Romans falter, realizing that this day will mark the beginning of a new chapter in military history. The Battle of Cannae is not just about force, it is about the ability to control the flow of battle, to manipulate the very will of the enemy. For now, the Romans are trapped in Hannibal's web. The battle is far from over, but the momentum is shifting in the Carthaginian favor. As the battle rages on, the deadly dance between Hannibal's forces and the Romans reaches its peak. The sky above the plains of Cannae grows darker, thick with the dust and smoke of battle, and the ground beneath the soldiers' feet becomes slick with blood. The Carthaginian forces, despite being outnumbered, are executing a strategy that will go down in history as one of the greatest feats of military brilliance: the double envelopment. But beneath the unfolding chaos of the battlefield, an even darker twist is taking shape. While Hannibal's plan seems to be working flawlessly, his victory is not as certain as it appears. Among his trusted generals, one has begun to undermine his efforts, not with an open betrayal, but with a subtle web of lies. The trusted officer, who has fought by Hannibal's side for years, is secretly sending false reports back to Hannibal's command tent, misguiding him about the movements of the enemy and the state of his own forces. The betrayal begins innocently enough. The officer, an ambitious and proud man, believes that his contributions to Hannibal's successes have been overlooked. He harbors a growing resentment, not toward Hannibal himself but toward his fellow commanders, who, in his view, have received more recognition for their contributions. This bitterness, like a slow poison, begins to cloud his judgment. He begins to tweak his reports, misrepresenting the strength of the Roman positions and the effectiveness of his own units, leading Hannibal to believe that the Romans are in a worse state than they actually are. As the battle unfolds, the lies compound. The officer reports that a key segment of the Roman forces is crumbling, and that their leadership is in disarray. In truth, the Roman lines are holding firm in some areas, and the fighting is far from over. Yet Hannibal, trusting his general's word, begins to underestimate the resilience of the Roman army. He becomes more focused on certain elements of the battle, diverting attention away from pockets of Roman strength that are still resisting the encirclement. It is only when a small unit of Carthaginian soldiers, trapped behind enemy lines, sends back a desperate message that the deception comes to light. The officer's false reports have inadvertently placed Hannibal's own forces in jeopardy. As troops are spread thin across the battlefield, unable to respond quickly to Roman counterattacks in certain areas, the false intelligence has opened gaps in Hannibal's carefully constructed trap, and the Romans, though still trapped in the envelopment, are beginning to exploit those weaknesses. The revelation of this betrayal sends shockwaves through Hannibal's command. He is torn. How could he have been so blind? Yet, as the battle rages on, Hannibal's genius shines through. He is quick to adapt, recognizing that the false reports have created opportunities for him to further manipulate the Roman forces. Rather than retreating or rethinking his entire strategy, Hannibal incorporates the lies into his plan, turning them into yet another layer of deception. The Roman commanders, still believing they are on the verge of breaking the Carthaginian forces, unwittingly walk into Hannibal's trap with renewed vigor. The Carthaginian army, bolstered by its commander's ability to turn the tables, continues its methodical execution of the double envelopment, tightening the noose around the Roman legions. Every step the Romans take, every moment they think they have gained ground, only brings them closer to annihilation. Hannibal's handling of the deception becomes a brilliant example of his adaptability, his ability to think on his feet, and his deep understanding of human nature. The betrayal within his own ranks does not shake him. It fuels his resolve. The battlefield, chaotic and filled with the screams of men and the clash of steel, is also a stage for Hannibal's unrivaled understanding of war. Every lie, every false move, only serves to draw the Romans deeper into his grasp. By the time the Romans fully realize they are ensnared, it is too late. Their forces, stretched thin and broken, begin to collapse under the weight of the Carthaginian envelopment. The battlefield is a slaughterhouse, and the victory, once uncertain, is now a certainty. But even as Hannibal stands on the verge of achieving the impossible, he cannot shake the feeling that the real cost of this battle has only just begun. As the Battle of Cannae escalates into a bloody crescendo, Hannibal's forces are steadily tightening the grip on the Romans, and the encirclement begins to close with devastating precision. The ground is soaked with blood, the sky dark with the smoke of burning debris, and the air thick with the stench of death. Yet, amid this chaos, the battlefield carries a chilling silence for Hannibal, one that cannot be drowned out by the cacophony of war. His mind, despite his tactical brilliance, drifts away from the battle, fixating on a dark, foreboding omen. Hidden deep within his personal tent, beneath layers of worn scrolls and military maps, there is an ancient document, a prophecy, passed down through the generations of Carthaginian commanders. The scroll was a relic of his father, Hannibal Barca, a man who knew that the destiny of Carthage was tied not just to military might, but to the ancient wisdom that had once guided their empire. The prophecy, a cryptic and enigmatic text, speaks of a great victory, one that would be decisive, but also carry a terrible cost for the victor. It foretells that Carthage's ultimate fall would come not from external forces, but from within its own fractured soul. As Hannibal stands over his battle maps, a messenger approaches and hands him the scroll. It is the same prophecy that his father had kept hidden, a grim reminder of the price of success. Hannibal's eyes scan the faded text, and for the first time in years, doubt begins to gnaw at him. The words speak of a victory so great that it would shatter the enemy, but also curse the victor with an insatiable thirst for more, eventually leading to internal decay and ruin. It warns that the cost of such triumphs would transcend the battlefield, poisoning the very heart of the empire it sought to protect. A shadow of unease settles over Hannibal. In the midst of the bloodshed, as his soldiers carve their way through the Roman lines, he cannot shake the weight of the prophecy. If he wins today, If he achieves the impossible, will he be the one to carry the curse of ultimate victory? Will the victory at Cannae be the very thing that condemns Carthage, a fleeting triumph masking the seeds of its destruction? The question lingers in his mind like a phantom, one he cannot rid himself of no matter how many victories he wins. Yet, there is more to the prophecy than just doom. It also speaks of an unknown enemy, an unseen force that will one day rise from the ashes of defeat, not in the form of an army, but as an ideology. This ideology, it predicts, will eventually overwhelm Carthage's strength, a silent, invisible enemy far more dangerous than the legions of Rome. It is the idea of a republic that can never be fully defeated, a resilience that will endure beyond military might. Hannibal knows what this means. Rome, the eternal enemy, may be defeated on the battlefield, but the republic will learn from its mistakes. It will adapt, evolve, and rise again, not through brute force, but through internal strength and reform. At the height of Cannae's horror, with the Roman legions collapsing, Hannibal is struck by the realization that he may have already sealed Carthage's fate by his very success. Victory at Cannae will force Rome to reinvent itself. It will survive, adapt, and grow even stronger. Meanwhile, Carthage, victorious but fragmented, may never fully recover from the long-term consequences of its internal divisions. The prophecy's warning seems to ring true. A great victory will lead to even greater ruin. In the midst of his internal turmoil, Hannibal cannot afford to dwell on these thoughts. The battle still rages, and his soldiers need his leadership. He returns to the battlefield, his resolve steeled by the weight of the prophecy. For now, he must push forward, for the promise of victory is too close to ignore. But in the back of his mind, the prophecy's ominous predictions haunt him like a ghost, whispering of an uncertain future. As the Roman legions are decimated and their ranks are shredded by the Carthaginian forces, Hannibal cannot help but glance over the battlefield with a sense of trepidation. The moment of victory is within his grasp, but it is tempered by the knowledge that this victory may not only be the end of Rome's army, but the beginning of a new, darker chapter for Carthage itself. Hannibal, who had spent years dreaming of this day, now faces an existential crisis. The ghosts of his past, the weight of his family's legacy, and the specter of the prophecy intertwine to create a maelstrom of doubt and fear. He knows that this battle will go down in history as one of the greatest military triumphs of all time, but what he doesn't know is whether it will be remembered as the turning point toward Carthage's ultimate downfall. As the battle at Cannae continues to unfold in his favor, Hannibal holds the prophecy close, the words still echoing in his mind. He pushes them aside, choosing to focus on the immediate triumph before him, but the thought lingers, casting a shadow over the greatness of his moment. The true cost of victory, he realizes, may be far greater than he can imagine. As the final moments of the battle draw near, the Carthaginian forces, led by Hannibal, are on the brink of achieving what many had deemed impossible, an annihilation of the Roman army at Cannae. The Romans, trapped and helpless within the tightening Carthaginian grip, have no escape, their soldiers falling by the thousands. Yet, as Hannibal's forces prepare for the final, decisive blow, a shocking betrayal threatens to unravel the very fabric of this hard-earned victory. Amid the clamor of the battlefield, as the bloodied and exhausted soldiers of both sides fight for survival, the whispers begin to spread through Hannibal's camp. A messenger, breathless and panicked, arrives at Hannibal's command tent, bearing a letter, one that will change the course of history. The message is a revelation, a shocking truth that shakes Hannibal to his core. A trusted member of his inner circle, someone he has fought alongside for years, is secretly working with the Romans. The traitor is none other than one of Hannibal's closest commanders, his own brother-in-law, a man who has long been seen as one of the pillars of Hannibal's leadership. This officer, who has shared in the triumphs and the tragedies of the Carthaginian army, has been in contact with Roman officials for months, feeding them critical intelligence about Hannibal's plans, his movements, and the Carthaginian strengths and weaknesses. The officer's motive, it seems, is driven by personal ambition, a desire to secure his own position of power, regardless of the cost to Carthage. His betrayal is not one of ideological conviction, but one rooted in greed and a desire for personal advancement. Hannibal's heart sinks as the truth settles in. The man he trusted, the one who stood by his side through every campaign, has betrayed him. The magnitude of the betrayal is staggering. The Carthaginian forces, already stretched thin with the complexity of the battle, are now facing the prospect of an inside threat, one that could tip the balance in favor of the Romans at the very moment of victory. This revelation hits Hannibal harder than the losses sustained on the battlefield. He feels the weight of the betrayal like a physical blow, the knife of treachery twisting in his gut. His first instinct is to have the traitor immediately executed, to show the rest of his forces that betrayal will not be tolerated. But something holds him back. In the midst of the war's chaos, Hannibal wonders if this betrayal is yet another part of a larger, more complex plan. Whether this is truly a moment of weakness or simply another twist in the greater game he's playing. With the Roman legions still in disarray, Hannibal's commanders gather in tense silence, their eyes fixed on their leader, who is now more resolute than ever. Despite the personal sting of the betrayal, Hannibal knows that he cannot let this revelation cloud his judgment. The battle is still not over, and the Romans, even in their weakened state, may yet have a final, desperate play left. As the traitor's actions come to light, it becomes clear that this has been a long-standing operation. The Romans, with their usual resilience, have prepared for such a moment. The betrayed officer has been feeding them information about the Carthaginian movements, but it has not been enough to turn the tide, until now. In his desperation, he has promised the Romans something even more valuable than intelligence: the loyalty of Carthage's own soldiers. He has assured them that with a timely strike, the Carthaginian forces will collapse from within. The shock of this realization sends ripples through the Carthaginian camp, but Hannibal is swift to act. Despite the crushing weight of this treachery, he refuses to let the traitor's actions alter the course of the battle. As the final envelopment closes in on the Roman army, Hannibal's genius takes over. He anticipates the Roman response, knowing they will attempt one last-ditch effort to break free. Instead of reacting out of vengeance, he adapts his strategy to outmaneuver them, using the very intelligence that had been sent to the Romans against them. The betrayal becomes part of the plan, a calculated risk, but one that, under Hannibal's command, is transformed into a weapon. In the final moments of the battle, as the Romans begin to mount a desperate counteroffensive, Hannibal unleashes the full might of his encirclement. The traitor's actions, though disastrous on a personal level, prove to be ineffective. The Romans, already overwhelmed by the Carthaginian forces, are once again caught in the jaws of the trap, their attempt at escape turning into a futile struggle for survival. The battlefield becomes a slaughterhouse, and the Romans are shattered. Yet, even as the final Roman commanders are cut down, Hannibal cannot shake the lingering thoughts of the betrayal. The victory, though decisive, feels bittersweet. The cost of winning this battle has become too high. The internal fracture within his army, the rot of disloyalty, will have far-reaching consequences. As the last of the Roman forces fall, Hannibal stands amidst the carnage, victorious but deeply troubled. He has won, but at what cost? The true consequences of the betrayal will only become apparent in the coming days, as Hannibal grapples with the realization that even in his greatest triumph, he may have already lost the war. The ghost of betrayal will continue to haunt him, not just in this battle, but in the days and years to come. The moment of reckoning has arrived. The Roman army, once proud and confident, is now a mass of disorganized chaos, trapped within the tightening circle of Hannibal's forces. The battle at Cannae is reaching its apex, the moment where victory or defeat will be sealed in blood. The Carthaginian forces, although outnumbered, have executed their plan with chilling precision. The double envelopment, the maneuver that Hannibal had studied, perfected, and believed would break the Romans, is now unfolding in all its terrifying brilliance. The Roman commanders, desperate to regain control, struggle against the grip of the Carthaginian forces, but it is no use. Hannibal's soldiers, under his unyielding command, press in from all sides, systematically crushing the Roman lines. The Roman cavalry, once their pride, is scattered and broken, unable to prevent the surrounding forces from tightening their grip. The Romans are encircled, trapped in a vice that will not relent. Hannibal stands atop a slight rise, watching with cold, calculating eyes as his forces close in for the kill. This is the culmination of his years of planning, the moment when his genius will shine through in the bloodied aftermath of war. The double envelopment, attacking the enemy's flanks and rear while their front remains occupied, is working flawlessly. The Romans, once sure of victory due to their sheer numbers, are now reduced to nothing more than trapped prey. Their formations, once disciplined and ordered, are shattered beyond repair. Panic sets in among the Roman soldiers, who are now fighting not for victory, but for survival. Yet as the tide turns irreversibly in Hannibal's favor, a deep sense of unease gnaws at him. The victory is within his grasp, but the weight of the cost begins to settle in. Hannibal realizes that the triumph he has engineered, while monumental, is a double-edged sword. The carnage around him is horrific. Bodies strewn across the battlefield, the cries of the wounded echoing in the air. The sheer scale of the bloodshed is overwhelming, and the realization hits him like a thunderclap. The victory at Cannae, as brilliant as it is, will come at a price far greater than he had anticipated. The Romans, caught in the perfect trap, are slaughtered mercilessly. Their legions, once the most formidable in the world, are now nothing more than fodder for the Carthaginian blades. The sheer devastation is unlike anything Hannibal has ever seen. The bodies of the dead pile high, and the battlefield, once a place of strategy and military brilliance, now becomes a gruesome monument to destruction. Victory, in this moment, feels less like a triumph and more like a curse. The very success he has longed for now seems tainted by the overwhelming loss of life on both sides. Hannibal moves through the battlefield, his eyes scanning the remnants of the Roman forces. He finds no joy in this slaughter. The faces of the fallen soldiers, both Roman and Carthaginian, haunt him. His soldiers, too, are weary, their spirits crushed by the scale of the carnage. As the battle draws to its bloody conclusion, Hannibal begins to question the true nature of his victory. He has outwitted and outmaneuvered the Romans, but at what cost? The magnitude of the death toll weighs heavily on his conscience. This was not the clean, decisive victory he had envisioned. It was an inferno, consuming all who stood in its path. The Romans, however, have not yet fully given up. In their desperation, they fight fiercely to the bitter end. But it is too late. The Carthaginian forces, despite the disarray caused by the betrayal and internal strife, are too well positioned to lose. The double envelopment has worked, and it will be remembered as one of the most brilliant military strategies in history. Yet even as the Roman commanders are killed or captured, Hannibal's mind lingers on the cost of the battle. The soldiers' cries, the sight of the broken men, and the destruction of an entire Roman army cannot be easily forgotten. Victory, for all its glory, is a hollow one in the face of such utter devastation. As the last Roman forces are overwhelmed and the field falls silent, Hannibal stands amidst the ruin, staring into the horizon. The sun sets over the carnage, casting long shadows across the battlefield. The victory at Cannae is a testament to his genius, but it is also a dark omen. The Romans will learn from this defeat, but it will be too late for them to stop the long-term damage to Carthage that has already begun. The blood spilled today will not simply be remembered as a victory. It will be the moment that forever changed the course of the war, but at a cost that may prove more than Hannibal can bear. In the end, as Hannibal surveys the devastation of the battlefield, he is struck by the realization that this victory, this perfect execution of strategy, may be a curse. Rome may have been broken, but the soul of Carthage, too, has been wounded. His dream of a decisive, final blow to the Romans has become something far darker. A turning point that will not lead to the Carthaginian Empire's ascent, but to its eventual decline. For all his brilliance, for all his triumphs, Hannibal understands one bitter truth. The victory at Cannae is a victory that will haunt him for the rest of his life. It is a victory that may seal Carthage's fate just as much as it destroys Rome's. The battlefield of Cannae is littered with the dead, a silent testament to the ferocity of the conflict. As the Carthaginian forces stand victorious, the full weight of their triumph begins to set in. The Romans have been shattered. Up to 70,000 men lost in a single day, and the air is thick with the scent of blood, sweat, and death. But amidst the victory, an uncomfortable truth begins to emerge. What Hannibal has won at Cannae may prove to be a Pyrrhic victory, a fleeting triumph that leaves more questions than answers. In the immediate aftermath, the Carthaginian soldiers, exhausted and battle-worn, gather to celebrate, though their joy is tempered by the horrific scene around them. The fields that had once held the promise of glory are now desecrated by the bodies of both Romans and Carthaginians. The victory, once so eagerly anticipated, feels strangely hollow. The sheer magnitude of the carnage weighs heavily on Hannibal's mind as he moves through the fallen ranks of both sides, his thoughts clouded by the vision of so much wasted life. Despite the rout of the Roman legions, there is no sense of elation in Hannibal's heart. As he stands in the midst of the carnage, the ghost of the battle haunts him. He had outwitted and outmaneuvered the Romans, but at what cost? The streets of Cannae, usually alive with the sounds of a bustling city, are eerily quiet. The sound of mourners wailing fills the air, as the survivors of both armies begin to mourn their fallen comrades. For Hannibal, this is not a time of celebration. In fact, the victory feels like an unbearable weight, a burden that he must carry for the rest of his life. Hannibal's commanders are equally somber. They, too, understand the magnitude of the battle. They've seen the Romans broken and scattered, yet they know that the war is far from over. This is but a single battle in a much larger conflict, and the Romans, despite their loss, are not defeated. They will regroup, they will rebuild, and they will seek vengeance. The victory at Cannae may have shattered their army, but the Roman Republic is not easily crushed. There is a lingering sense of unease among the Carthaginian commanders, who begin to fear that this victory might ultimately prove to be a hollow one. In the coming days, Hannibal surveys the aftermath of the battle with grim determination. Despite the Roman defeat, the Carthaginian forces are far from unscathed. Their numbers have been thinned by the brutal fighting, and there are no resources to sustain their army in the long term. They have won the battle, but the war is far from over. The cost of this victory becomes clearer with each passing hour. The men that Hannibal has led through countless campaigns are tired, broken, and hungry, their spirits tested by the grim reality of the war they are locked in. Even worse, Hannibal begins to realize that the battle at Cannae, while a tactical masterpiece, has not achieved the one thing that would have truly secured Carthaginian supremacy, an absolute and decisive victory. The Romans may have been crushed on the battlefield, but their resolve is unbroken. They are already planning their next move, and Hannibal's victory, for all its brilliance, has not weakened Rome's ability to wage war. Carthage, too, is starting to feel the strain. The victory at Cannae has proven to be a double-edged sword. While Hannibal has shattered the Roman army in the field, Carthage itself is beginning to feel the absence of resources. The Carthaginian army, despite its success at Cannae, is still far from self-sufficient. Supplies are running low, reinforcements are scarce, and the threat of Roman retribution looms large. In his heart, Hannibal knows that he cannot continue to fight the war on his own. In a moment of reflection, as he surveys the wreckage of the battlefield, Hannibal wonders if this victory, for all its brilliance, has condemned his cause to failure. The Romans, having suffered this crushing defeat, are now more determined than ever to resist Carthage's advance. Worse still, the empire that Hannibal is trying to save is slowly unraveling from within. The internal political strife in Carthage, already a simmering cauldron of discontent, is beginning to boil over. The Senate and the ruling elite are at odds with one another, and their lack of support for Hannibal's campaign is becoming more pronounced. They have not sent him the reinforcements he so desperately needs, and their refusal to commit further resources to his cause speaks volumes about the disconnect between Carthage's military and political leadership. The bitterness of this reality sets in deeper as Hannibal reflects on the ghosts of war, the countless soldiers he has lost, the cities he has failed to liberate, and the long years of hardship that have taken a toll on his body and his soul. Despite his tactical brilliance and the devastation wrought upon Rome, Hannibal cannot shake the feeling that his victory at Cannae has only delayed the inevitable. The Roman juggernaut may have been dealt a blow, but it has not been defeated. In fact, this very victory may have given the Romans the resolve to rise from their ashes. As the days pass and the dead are buried, the realization dawns on Hannibal that the war, in all its brutal, endless cycle, is far from over. The battle at Cannae has proven that Rome is vulnerable, but it has also proven that Carthage, despite its fleeting triumphs, is weak. The price of this victory is not just in the blood spilled on the battlefield, but in the toll it has taken on the Carthaginian cause itself. The ghosts of those who died at Cannae will haunt Hannibal, a reminder that victory is not always as it seems, and that the price of war is far more than just blood. The ashes of defeat are often the fertile soil from which great empires grow. Though Rome was shattered at Cannae, its resilience, the very essence of the Roman spirit, was forged in the crucible of this crushing loss. As the dust settled over the battlefield and the survivors of the Roman army limped away from the wreckage, a sense of quiet determination began to take root in the Republic. This would not be the end for Rome. The lesson of Cannae would be etched into the collective consciousness of the Roman military, and from the depths of this humiliation, they would rise again, stronger, wiser, and more ruthless than ever before. The Senate, faced with a staggering defeat, initially fell into disarray. There was panic in the streets of Rome. Citizens, once confident in their invincibility, now trembled before the might of Hannibal. Rome had lost a battle, but it could not afford to lose the war. The balance of power had shifted dramatically, and the Republic, ever mindful of its long history, knew that their survival depended on how quickly they could adapt to this new reality. The initial response was chaotic. Nearly half of the Roman Senate had been wiped out in the battle or had resigned in disgrace. But out of this calamity emerged a new breed of leadership: commanders, tacticians, and politicians who understood that Rome's strength was not just in its size, but in its capacity to learn from defeat and turn it into something greater. One of the most pivotal figures to rise in the aftermath of Cannae was Fabius Maximus, a seasoned consul who would become known as Cunctator, the Delayer. His approach to the war would be radically different from the previous Roman generals. Instead of rushing headlong into battle with brute force, he would teach Rome to respect caution and patience. Fabius realized that confronting Hannibal directly on the battlefield was a fool's errand. Rome had underestimated the Carthaginian general's brilliance and paid the price. Now, the key to Rome's survival lay in a strategy of attrition. Fabius advocated for a strategy of avoidance, harrying Hannibal's forces with guerrilla tactics, cutting off supplies, and slowly eroding the morale of the Carthaginian army. He knew that Carthage, despite its stunning victories, could not sustain a prolonged war in enemy territory. The Roman legions would not be drawn into a battle they could not win, and Fabius understood that the true victory lay not in swift action, but in the slow, relentless grinding down of the enemy's will to fight. While Fabius's strategy of delay was controversial, many Romans felt it was dishonorable. It ultimately proved essential. It forced Hannibal to expend resources and manpower in futile campaigns, slowly undermining his ability to wage war in Italy. The Carthaginian general had become overextended, his supply lines thinning, and his army growing weary under the weight of constant harassment. Rome's resolve had not been broken. Instead, it was the Carthaginian resolve that began to crack. But Rome's response to Cannae was not merely tactical. It was cultural and psychological. The loss of Cannae forced the Romans to reflect on the fundamental nature of their military. They could no longer afford to rely solely on the sheer size and might of their legions. The battle had shown that tactics, adaptability, and leadership were just as crucial to victory as the number of men in the field. The old ways of thinking had to be cast aside. Rome needed a new doctrine of war. The legacy of Cannae also brought about a sweeping reform of the Roman army. No longer would it be enough to simply field large armies. The Romans began to focus on the training, discipline, and intelligence of their soldiers. More than just warriors, the Roman legionaries would become masters of strategy and maneuver. They would be taught to think on their feet, to adapt to ever-changing circumstances, and to outsmart their enemies, not just overpower them. Rome's military infrastructure underwent drastic changes. The legions were reorganized to be more flexible, less reliant on rigid formations that could be exploited by a genius tactician like Hannibal. Smaller, faster units would be able to conduct swift strikes, harass the enemy, and adapt to the fluid nature of battle. The Romans also introduced new tactics, such as feigned retreats, which would later become a hallmark of their military doctrine. Cannae had taught them that victory was not simply about overwhelming an enemy with numbers, but about manipulating the battlefield, creating confusion, and exploiting weaknesses. Perhaps the most profound effect of Cannae on Rome was the way it changed the Roman psyche. No longer did the Romans view their military as an unstoppable juggernaut. The humbling defeat made them realize that their strength lay not in invincibility, but in their ability to rise from defeat, to learn from it, and to never give up. This resolve would become the defining feature of Roman military culture for centuries to come. As the years passed and the war with Carthage continued, the effects of Cannae were felt in every Roman maneuver. The lessons of that battle, seared into the minds of commanders and soldiers alike, would not be forgotten. And, in time, the tables would turn. The Romans would learn to fight Hannibal on their own terms, conserving resources, avoiding costly direct confrontations, and slowly but steadily strangling the Carthaginian war machine. Eventually, Hannibal's army, worn out and desperate, would be forced to retreat. But even more than this, Rome's response to Cannae forged its enduring legacy as a military superpower. The war with Carthage would drag on, but the Romans, now more seasoned and battle-hardened than ever, would eventually emerge victorious. And in the ashes of their defeat at Cannae, the Roman Republic would be reborn, not just as a state, but as a military machine that would go on to dominate the Mediterranean world. Rome's legacy, shaped by the bitter lessons of Cannae, would resonate for centuries. From the ashes of one of the greatest defeats in military history, Rome would rise to become an empire like no other, resilient, relentless, and ultimately unbreakable. The final act of Cannae's legacy comes not on the battlefield but in the quiet aftermath, where victory and defeat become one in a tragic paradox. The flames of Rome's most humiliating defeat are far from extinguished, as the battle's shocking conclusion unveils the true cost of war, one far greater than the blood spilled at Cannae. It's here, at the edge of the empire, that Hannibal's genius is revealed to be both his greatest triumph and his greatest tragedy. Though Carthage celebrated the devastating victory, the ghost of Cannae's prophecy lingered over Hannibal like an unshakable shadow. As the Carthaginian commander watched the Roman legions crumple under his perfect envelopment, a quiet doubt gnawed at him. He had achieved what few in history could even dream of, the annihilation of a Roman army that outnumbered him nearly 2-1. But as he stood amidst the carnage, he began to question the true nature of his victory. For years, the prophecy had haunted him, an ancient scroll hidden within his tent, detailing the future destruction of Carthage if they won this war. The message was chilling. A victory at Cannae will be the start of the end. Carthage will be destroyed not by the might of Rome, but by its own rot from within. At the time, Hannibal had dismissed it as superstition, a meaningless relic of old fears. But now, as his army basked in the glow of its triumph, the ominous words seemed eerily prophetic. The victory, though resounding, was a hollow one. Carthage was far from invincible. The empire, crippled by internal corruption, was already showing signs of disintegration. Hannibal's victory at Cannae had come at a time when Carthage lacked the resources and resolve to fully capitalize on the devastation wrought upon Rome. The political landscape of Carthage was fractured, and while Hannibal's military brilliance was undeniable, he was fighting not only against the Romans but against a system that was slowly unraveling from within. Carthage's ruling council, marred by infighting and a reluctance to invest in Hannibal's campaign, failed to send reinforcements to support him after Cannae. While the victory at Cannae could have been the turning point of the Second Punic War, the Carthaginian government was hesitant to back up its general success. The Senate's neglect, driven by fear of the sacrifices needed for a prolonged war, ultimately doomed Hannibal's chances of securing a lasting victory. As Rome struggled to rebuild, its generals learned from their mistakes, adapting their tactics to avoid the same fate in future engagements. With each passing year, Rome reformed and reorganized its military, evolving into a force more capable than ever before. But Carthage, meanwhile, remained stagnant, its political machinations hampering any chance of a decisive push toward victory. The Carthaginian elite failed to comprehend the urgency of the situation. Hannibal was left to fight a war without the full support of his homeland. Hannibal, ever the brilliant tactician, understood that time was running out. As his forces continued to harass Rome and wage campaigns across Italy, the Romans had adapted to his strategies, and the tide began to shift. The weariness of his army began to show, their supplies stretched thin, and the once noble cause of Carthage became increasingly difficult to sustain. The final blow came when Scipio Africanus, Rome's rising star, led an audacious campaign into North Africa, directly threatening Carthage itself. Hannibal, ever the loyal son of Carthage, was recalled to defend his homeland. By this point, his army was weakened, and the support he received from Carthage was insufficient to mount a proper defense. In 202 BCE, at the Battle of Zama, Hannibal faced Scipio in what would be the final confrontation of the Second Punic War. For all his brilliance, Hannibal's forces were crushed, and Carthage was forced to sue for peace. Rome emerged victorious. Yet, the real cost of the war, the cost that Hannibal had feared, was not in the lives lost on the battlefield but in the unraveling of Carthage itself. Rome, though humiliated at Cannae, had grown stronger from the lessons of its defeat. Carthage, on the other hand, was broken from within. The internal corruption, the lack of unity, and the failure to provide Hannibal with the necessary resources to fully exploit his victories. All of these factors contributed to Carthage's eventual downfall. The prophecy, though dismissed by many, had turned out to be prophetic indeed. Hannibal's war had been one of unmatched brilliance, but his inability to unite his forces, to create lasting change within Carthage, and to see the full picture of the conflict left him trapped in a paradox of success and failure. Despite his tactical genius, the political and social rot of Carthage had undermined his every effort. As he watched the city of Carthage burn in the final moments of the Second Punic War, Hannibal must have known that his greatest victory had been, in the end, his most costly mistake. The prophecy had been right. Cannae was the beginning of the end. Rome had learned from its defeat, adapted and rebuilt, ultimately emerging as the dominant power of the ancient world. Carthage, meanwhile, was left to rot from the inside, consumed by internal strife and unable to grasp the true cost of war. The empire Hannibal had fought so hard to preserve was lost, not because of Roman might, but because of the inability to see beyond the immediate victories to the long-term consequences.